Hello again. Modern warfare is a truly terrible thing. In the 18th and 19th centuries, battles were often fought in open country, far from cities and towns. The result was that the casualties were often limited to the combatants. This was the case during many battles of the Napoleonic Wars and the Crimean War. Sometimes spectators would come from nearby villages to watch the fighting, so the battle were an entertainment rather like a rugby match. Of course, all this changed in the 20th century, and both civilians and their homes began to be recognised as legitimate targets for the enemy forces. One thinks, for example, of the Blitz on London, the bombing of Dresden, and American actions during the war in Vietnam. The refugee, fleeing from a home destroyed by enemy action, became almost a symbol of the mid-20th century. This was, of course, a very unfortunate state of affairs, but it was not restricted to any one nation. Most countries found that attacking the enemy's home territory was the most effective way of harming morale, and it was hoped encouraging surrender. Like most people, I deplore this way of waging war, but at the same time I accept that it is these days all but universal. The civilian population of Syria and Iraq, Afghanistan and Gaza, Ukraine, Israel and Somalia have all borne the brunt of the fighting in those areas over the last few years. This then is the reality of war. People are invariably blown up and shot during wars, and these days the chances are that these casualties will be civilians. This is what has happened in Israel and Gaza. A war is fought and many civilians have been killed. It is when one side loses a war that the death rate and number of refugees usually soars. After Germany had been defeated in 1945, an estimated 12 million refugees were created as Germans living in what is now Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe were driven out. Taken together with the firebombing of cities like Dresden and Hamburg, the death toll and scale of human suffering in defeated Germany was appalling. As I say, that is par for the course if you lose a war, especially if it is one you've started. In that case, the victors can behave in a very vindictive fashion. The situation in Gaza is dreadful, but not exceptional. Like most people, I am opposed to war, and like almost everybody, I find the sight of refugees shocking. Shocking, but not unusual. As I say, it is when people start wars and lose them that these things are at their worst. Does anybody remember the awful situation in Biafra after the Igbos under Colonel Ojukwu had started a war and then lost to the Federal Army? It was even worse than Gaza. In short, we are seeing here a typical situation in modern warfare, and it is by no means the most shocking in terms of human suffering. One nation started a war against another and lost, and now we're seeing effectively the aftermath of that war. To call it genocide is absurd. If the Israelis really wish to exterminate the people of Gaza, they could do it in a week or two. What they are currently doing is getting back the hostages, and they're not being at all fussy about how they achieve that end. We can all of us express our horror and detestation of war, but when we start singling out one particular area or nation for our condemnation, this usually says more about us and our prejudices than it does anything else.